Welcome back to my channel for a medium format episode. I'm currently here in Frankfurt. I arrived this afternoon and I'm here to shoot the night skyline of Frankfurt for a client. He had sent me via WhatsApp an image. It's an older image from 2013. And he said, I want to have that picture, but I want to have it in high resolution and you need to take that photo for me. So in my backpack, I have my camera GFX100 II and the GF 35 to 70 millimeter for some flex on framing and the perspective. And I'm scouting now for that location, which gives me exactly that perspective he had in mind with his image. And I think that's the one. If I look at the bridge, looks to me like I will climb upstairs a lot before I find the right bridge. Nice atmosphere here in Frankfurt, super nice skyline, but that's not the perspective he had on that sample image. So maybe that's the bridge with the perspective I'm looking for here in front of me. My third attempt. I'm really tired now, climbing a lot of stairs. Hopefully that's the bridge I'm looking for. Let's see. That's it. That's the perspective. I don't think there's anything better in life than being a photographer and enjoying these moments on a bridge with a camera towards the skyline. Multishot is something I also wanted to try. We'll come back in sample images. And finally now I'm here. This is the view he is looking for. This is the view I was looking for. Here I will do my shooting, spend about an hour, then going back to the hotel and flying back to Zurich tomorrow morning. I'm back in the studio in Switzerland, always very happy to return home. It was a short trip. I was actually arriving in Frankfurt around 3 p.m. on Wednesday and traveled back on Thursday morning via my flight to Zurich. And first of all, I want to show you that image, which I tried to imitate. And this image seems to be from 2013. The client sent it to me via WhatsApp and said he wants about that image, kind of same perspective at night towards the skyline of Frankfurt. And I, of course, tried to imitate that. Now, the colored reflections in the water, that I did not fully match because depending on how the city in the background is glowing in light and color, you will get this reflected in the water. And it was a bit different now 12 years later. So 2013 to 2025, things change in the skyline. But nevertheless, I got nice shots. I'm going to show them in a moment. Before, in order to do justice to the title of this videos, I want to give you my specific reasons why I did decide for the GFX100 II for that job. Before going to the actual camera, let me show you. This is what I typically have with me on travel. If I'm traveling with the GFX cameras, I want 2 spare batteries, I want a charger, and I will make sure that they are in my backpack just in case. Now, this beast here can shoot for a while before it runs out of power. It's much more powerful in terms of battery like the smaller cameras I sometimes show on my channel. But nevertheless, be on the safe side. You know, better having more batteries in your backpack than regretting later that you have not enough power. The second accessory I always have with me when shooting is a lens pen. And the lens pen here is from the Leica store in Zurich, and it has basically 2 functions. You can remove the dust here before you actually clean the lens to make sure you don't leave scratches and marks on the glass. And with this tool here, you can clean the lens. And this is super convenient. Turns out that for me, this works much better than any other tool. I have it in different versions, different styles. I always make sure I have one in my backpack. Now, coming to the camera. Why did I decide for the GFX100 II and for the 35 to 70 millimeter lens for this job in Frankfurt? And there are various reasons which I want to outline and also show here in the studio. Of course, I have plenty of choices. If you look here in the background and you know it from my channel, I have so much gear. You know, it's always a longer time processing before I decide what I want to shoot. But for this job, it was immediately clear to me that I will do this with the GFX100 II. And the first reason is I had only this one night. As I said, I did fly into Frankfurt. I was arriving around 3 p.m. I knew I had one evening. In the morning, I have to fly back for other stuff, which I need to get done in Zurich. And if there is just one slot where you can do a shooting, you want to have a backup. And here on the Fuji GFX100 II, we have 2 card slots. I have here a compact flash express type B, and I have an SD card slot. And my camera, let me quickly switch it on to show you. Let's get the lens out, switch this on. If we go here into the menu, there is here under the utilities section, you have the card slot setting. And this is for me always on backup. So I know for sure that every image I will shoot in this particular night will end up on the compact flash express type B as well as on the SD card slot. And of course, I could have decided for a Nikon C8 or a Sony Alpha 1 Mark II, whatever. They all have 2 card slots. But doing it with a camera with just 1 card slot, if it counts for just one night, that is too risky for me. So I didn't want to do that. And that's the first reason why I decided for the GFX100 Mark II. And there are more reasons which will explain to you why it was not any other camera. The second reason here, which distinguishes this camera from basically any other camera I know, is the Electronic Viewfinder. I wanted to make my image composition and also the focusing with the Electronic Viewfinder. And that is for me the most convenient way to shoot at night. And this is, I think, probably the best EVF you can find in the market. It's larger than any other viewfinder I know. And it also has the highest resolution. So we talk here about 0.64 inch in terms of size. And we talk about 9.44 million dots. That is substantially beyond that what other cameras offer. It's really a perfect viewfinder. And I really wanted to shoot with the EVF. So I wanted to make sure I have the best resolution for zooming in and seeing if the images sit how I want them to sit, and to make sure I get the best image composition. You could do this, of course, via the LCD, but I rather have my eye on the camera, even when the camera is on a tripod. That's just my shooting habit. And this EVF here is probably one of the best, if not the best EVF, which is currently available in the market. And just to put this quickly into context, if we compare the GFX100 Mark II with its main competitor, the Hasselblad X2D, here we have an EVF with 0.5 inch in terms of size, and 5.76 million dots compared to 9.44 million dots here and a size of 0.64 inch. And in my recent comparison of the Sony RX1R Mark III with the Leica Q3 28 and 43, we saw that the 2 Leica cameras have 5.76 million dots, which is currently the top standard. But this camera here goes significantly beyond that, which was the second reason why I decided for this camera for this particular job. Third reason is that the camera is very reliable. I never had any issue with a GFX camera, and I have them for a few generations now already. It's a very robust camera. It's bigger than other cameras you typically see on my channel. It's really one of the bigger cameras I have here in my hands, but it's very solid. It was resting on a tripod anyway for that night shooting. You still see here the settings, 20 seconds and f8.0 for lens and cityscapes. And it is weather resistant. It's just a very solid build. Let's quickly put this camera lens combination on a scale to see its weight, because I think it's not as heavy as it looks like. So let's put this on here. And then you see is, what is it? About 1.5 kilogram. And that's actually okay for what I have here in my hands. If I have the data correctly in my mind, it's actually about a little more than a kilogram for the camera body and around 400 grams for the lens. And we saw it was close to 1.5 kilogram. I also have here a UV filter, protector mounted. I have 2 cards in it, battery in it, and so on. So with 1.48, 1.49 kilogram, that's actually not as heavy as it looks like if you look at that massive camera body with that big lens. And the Fuji GF lenses, they are generally big. There are a few smaller ones, but in general, they are big. And here, I think it looks heavier than it is. It was, in any case, comfortable in my backpack. And then on the tripod, I don't realize the weight of the camera lens combo anyway no longer. My reason number 4 why I decided for the GFX100 Mark II is the sensor resolution of a little more than 100 megapixel. And shooting natively with 100 megapixel is in the normal camera segment, if you forget about phase 1 for a moment, only possible with the Hasselblad X2D and the GFX100 Mark II and its predecessors, of course. And here I was going for the largest resolution. You see I was here going for L. I was shooting in, let me quickly show that, in Superfine and RAW. I never work with JPEG images, but I used them for a quick preview on the MacBook. So when I came home to the hotel around, I think 10:30, 11 p.m., I was quickly going through the JPEGs and looked if they are to my liking. Otherwise, I would have started all over again. But I work with the RAW file, of course. And here, as an exception, I was also going for uncompressed RAW. Normally, if I'm shooting, I go for lossless compression. That is a much more efficient file format. and image format for me. But here I was going for uncompressed, and that makes, of course, the file size ultra large, but it also makes sure that I really have the last quantum of information being possible to be squeezed out from the images. Reason number 5, in terms of handling, this is one of the cameras I like most. There are so many mechanical buttons and elements on it. And if you are used to the workflow, this makes your life super easy. Look here. You have here 5 mechanical elements. You have an autofocus on button. You have a rear control wheel. You have here 2 buttons. You have the super convenient mode dial here. You have here at the top side 3 customizable function buttons and 2 at the front side. Look at this. So if you take time and configure this camera in a way that it suits your needs, you can design your workflow in a way that you become very quick. And I like this a lot when I work with the GFX100 II. Of course, I mean, guys, you know, right? I'm a Leica fanboy. I love my Leica Q3 cameras, my SL3, my SL3S, all of that. But these cameras are minimalistic, and sometimes it slows me down to go through the menu or using a touch screen and having not enough buttons which I can use. Comparable, in my opinion, to the Fuji GFX100 II clearly is the Nikon C8, the Nikon C9, and the Sony Alpha 1 Mark II. They also have a lot of buttons which you can customize to your liking. But on the Fuji, I think it's extremely nice. For instance, when I shoot this camera, not necessarily on a tripod, I have here on the 3 buttons always the same configuration. The very left-hand side button switches on face detection. Now it's on, then it's off. The second one is for animals. Subject detection on and off, and the third one is actually for my autofocus mode. And everything that's important for me I have on a function button. By the way, guys, if you're interested to get a tutorial with certain tips and tricks on GFX cameras, because they all work in the same way, including the newer GFX100 RF, drop me a comment, let me know if you want to see this. So far, the tutorials I've posted on YouTube, like this one here, they've been quite successful and people like it, because I show actually taking myself time how you set up certain functions and use certain features. So if you like to see that, let me know. I'm happy to get the work done and post a tutorial on GFX cameras from Fuji. By the way, you can also customize these buttons, of course, and that's done in the menu. If you go here in the menu and you go to this section here, the tool section or utilities section, how I like to call it, and then you have the button and dial setting. And for instance, then you have the function FN setting here, and then you get a pictogram of the camera with all the different buttons, and you can assign functions to them in the way you want, which is very nice. I should say I like the Leica way of doing customization of buttons more. So in the Leica way, if you tap the button, you get the function. If you tap and hold, you actually can select the function which comes if you tap it next time. That is even quicker than going into the menu, but I can live with that implementation here very well. And for me, the way this camera body is done, it's also a bigger one. I mentioned it with almost 1.5 kilogram with this particular lens, is really helping me in my workflow. Reason number 6 why I find it very convenient to shoot with this particular GFX camera is the very generous, spacious, and information-rich top display. There's a little bit in the light reflections here. I'm not sure if you can see it, but currently I'm in aperture priority, and here I can steer my aperture. I'm currently stopping down. Now I'm opening the aperture wider. And it's, in my opinion, at least I'm not aware of a top display that's bigger, the biggest one you get in the market. The Hasselblad also has a top display, which is convenient, of course, but it's much smaller and it's not as information rich as we have it on the GFX camera. And I like that a lot. I like looking at the camera body from the top, in particular, if the tripod is at waist level. And then I get all the important information and basically can steer the camera from viewing at it from the top, which is very nice. So that's my reason number 6. I'm almost done. Reason number 7, and that's related to the sensor, but not relevant for my shooting in Frankfurt, of course, is in-body image stabilization. That's very well done on many modern cameras these days, and the Fuji GFX100 II is here no exception. It's very well done in the Hasselblad X2D. You gain a bunch of stops for longer handheld shooting, and the same is true for the GFX100 II. I didn't need this on my tripod, and actually, if I go quickly in the menu, I want to give you a quick tip and show you something. Let's go here into the camera menu. And on the camera menu, let's go down until we find image stabilization. So here's the image stabilization mode. And you can have here continuous, shooting only, and off. And I realized if I go for longer exposures, I actually need to switch it off. I might have still that image in the sample images, which I can show you. Let's see. And for certain reasons, and in contrast to any other camera I'm aware of and I'm shooting, on the tripod, the camera does not like, if you go for exposures longer than 1 or 2 seconds, to have image stabilization on if you are shooting longer exposures on the tripod. I don't know why that is. Maybe I did something wrong. If you have information about that, please drop me a comment. I think classical school in photography always said, if you're on a tripod, switch off image stabilization. But most of my cameras don't mind. If I take long exposures with a Leica Q3 and optical image stabilization, I can leave image stabilization activated. If I do it with a Nikon C8, I can leave it activated. I'm pretty sure if I do it with Hasselblad X2D, I can keep in-body image stabilization activated even for 20, 30-second exposures on a tripod. With the Fuji, I experienced now twice that the images become fuzzy if I have this activated and shoot longer than 1 or 2 seconds on a tripod. I don't know why. Drop me a comment if you have information about that. The classical rule of thumb is clear. Switch it off if you don't need it on a tripod. I'm typically lazy, leave it on, but the Fuji doesn't forgive that. It gives you fuzzy images, at least in my humble experience here. Reason number 8 is that although this menu structure here is quite complex, it's reasonably tidy and clean. And I think the Fuji GFX100 II has a high level of complexity for being operated. That's why a couple of minutes ago I offered a tutorial if you want to see that, so don't forget to drop me a comment. But it is organized and structured in a way that I immediately get the point. And then if you are in live view, of course, you also have the Q button here. And the Q button offers you quick menus. So let's say currently, if you look here, I have a self timer still activated of 2 seconds. If I want to get rid of that, I go into the Q menu and then I can toggle here around until I come to self timer and then I can switch it off. See here, now it's on 2 seconds, 10 seconds off. Very convenient. And you can also customize these type of screens and functions. And that again helps my workflow being speedier and just smoother than with some other cameras. Reason number 9 for deciding for the GFX100 II is the Pixel Shift Multishot mode. I mentioned before, resolution counted here in my shooting, and natively 100 megapixel is already very strong, but I also wanted to try the multi-shot mode. Now, I come back to the multi-shot mode later in this video in about 2 or 3 minutes, but you reach it here under drive and then either you scroll down all the way or you are smart and just push it up and then you are here, Pixel Shift Multishot. And this gives you up to 400 megapixel, which is an insanely high resolution. But as I said, let me come back to that point later when I finished my 10 reasons why I did decide for that camera. Reason number 10, and then my list is completed, really is the image quality. And image quality is, of course, more than resolution on a sensor or how wide you can open the aperture on the lens, what have you. Image quality is the final result you can sell for real money to clients. And image quality on the Fuji GFX100 II is just excellent. And if you want, and if you are playful, you can also experiment, of course, with all the film simulations, which Fuji always includes in the digital cameras and can generate certain looks. I'm not that type of person. I rather shoot my image, let's call it naked, and then get it more pretty in Lightroom. But if you want that out of camera, you have a lot of options here to do that. All right. That's my list of 10 reasons why I decided for this particular shooting for the GFX100 II. And I hope you will agree that these are good reasons. Now, there are 2 weaknesses I want to mention on this camera. And I only found two things which I really don't like. And the first is, again, regarding the multi-shot mode. I think the software is tedious, how Fuji implemented this. First of all, if I do multi-shot, Pixel Shift Multishot with a Nikon C8, I just throw them into the Nikon software, and no matter how many 100 images there are, it will sort it out which image belongs to which series. Here I have not found a better way than selecting 16 images of a series, that's what this setting here is producing, by using the Fuji software and then importing it into the Pixel Shift software. So we finally get one frame with 400 megapixel. And that is something which is annoying and not convenient and not really well done. And the second feature I'm missing, again, if you have seen this in the software, let me know. But in contrast to other camera brands, we don't have here an option in the software to remove motion artifacts. And I will show you one sample image where you clearly see the motion artifacts. I'll also show you how I hexed it away in post-processing, but this is inconvenient. So I think the Pixel Shift Multishot mode here is technically working well, in the processing a little bit tedious and not very well done. And the second design feature on that camera that always annoys me is the position of the Q button. I just think people have not thought this to the end. Because I come very often with the palm of my hand accidentally on that button. Have a look here. Here it is. And I don't want the Q menu popping up at this point in time. If they would have placed it somewhere different, let's say on the top here where we have space or somewhere else, I would love it. But here it's always in my way. I always accidentally touch it. And that happens not only once in a shooting, it happens 5, 10, 15 times. And I hate it. I almost have to focus and concentrate to hold the camera like this, so the Q button is lurking around the corner of my fingers here. But very often accidentally I just tap it and then it's there, and I don't want it that way. But these are the only 2 points I personally think I can criticize on this camera. You could say it's too bulky, but you saw 1.5 kilogram for a professional medium format camera. That's quite okay, I think. In general, there's not much to criticize. And if we go now into the sample images where I played a little bit with the raw footage, you will see the image quality is also absolutely fantastic. You can easily sell this to clients and you will be very happy, even if you just go overnight to Frankfurt for a little photo shooting from a bridge. I was early on the location. And you saw in the first couple of minutes when I showed you the clips from walking through Frankfurt, sometimes a little bit out of breath because I had to go stairs up and down on the bridges. I needed to scout the right location. And this is about the perspective. But it's more far away than the image the client sent me via WhatsApp, which I showed to you before. And that's why it was a good idea to have the 35 to 70 millimeter zoom lens on the GFX100 II to make sure I have some flex in getting closer to the subject by zooming into the scene. And I think this is a nice image, shows the skyline of Frankfurt, is very sharp, very clear. If we go through that, you catch a lot of details. That's now the 100 megapixel resolution. And you see my shutter speed here was 1/3 of a second. So that had a good chance to work with multishot. So I took the same scene again. And here you see now this is at 400 megapixel, the same scene. And of course I get much, much closer into the pixel peeping mode here if I want, and you get a lot of details here. This is really good. I can use this image, but, and that's my weakness number 1, which I mentioned before in my little excursion, you see here, if you follow the mouse pointer here, you see all these artifacts. And these artifacts are all from composing 16 frames, which were shot in 1/3 of a second shutter speed, but then consecutively into one single frame. So we have all these artifacts. I don't know if you can see it, but there is some color glowing going on here, pixel thing stuff. I don't know what that really is. And I think it would be so easy for Fuji to include, like other brands, a motion artifacts removal function in the software. But at least I haven't found it. Maybe it's hidden somewhere. And if you know where it is, let me know, because I will more frequently use it. But I at least didn't find that function, which, for instance, you find in the Sony software for pixel shift photography. And I can clean this up, of course, via artificial intelligence in Lightroom. I show you kind of the same picture, same scene a little bit later. Here, also 400 megapixel, looks very good. Is a bit darker. It always needs time to update here. Wait a moment before it becomes sharp. It says loading here. Is a lot of megapixels, 400 megapixels. Now it's sharp, you see? And this looks really, really good, that image. You can print this in a huge dimension, no problem at all. Let's look at the church here, because the church was supposed to be in the scene. Very nice. You see it's 9:15 o'clock. You see here one of the big Swiss banks with their headquarters in Germany. And it is actually a very good image. And the artifacts I could completely remove in Lightroom. If you look here, these artifacts which were here along the way, they are now all gone. I could actually hex them away. But I don't really like that technology, because it kind of gets the scene artificially cleaned up, because there should be people moving. And I show you how that works very quickly. If you go into the develop section, it needs time to update again from pixel view into something better. Give it a moment. And we go here into this tool here, the remove tool. And I can choose my size here, but if I click on that, look at this part of the image, which looks a little bit weird, probably also some artifacts in it. I click on it, I say remove, and then AI will calculate the context and will remove that in a way that you don't realize that it's gone. You see, completely clean now. And that's the way I can clean this up. So I can also use multishot for longer exposures, like 1/3 of a second or even longer, maybe 1 or 2 seconds. Here it's 0.5 seconds at f8.0 and base ISO 80. And then the scene looks clean, but a little bit artificial, because around this time in the evening, there should actually be people along the waterfront. And that is something which I personally don't like a lot, but you can save the image, right? This image I can also sell to someone who needs that insanely high resolution of 400 megapixel for a super large print dimension. And in general, let's look around a little bit. It's very nice. I think everything here is nicely captured. The GFX100 Mark II is such a workhorse. It never let me down when I use it for professional shooting, and it looks really good. Also, look here at the bridge. Very nice. And here where people didn't move, you don't have these artifacts from the pixel shift processing later on. Now here's an image I personally like. The city is a bit closer. I also cropped this into 16:9 aspect ratio. And I think this would give a nice print on the wall. I would put this in my living room. It's not an HDR image. I'll show you HDR images later, because I was also using exposure bracketing, and I will also comment on that. But here, this is a very nice picture if you look at that. Clean, clear, warm colors, evening sky, nicely captured. I think this is one of the really good shots, which I like a lot. It was shot at 1/8 of a second, f8.0. I always did shoot at base ISO of 80. And this is at 70mm focal length now. So I was really happy. I have not decided in Zurich before I started my travel to go for a prime lens, because I needed that flex here. And by the way, on the Hasselblad system and on the Fuji system, the zoom lenses are so good that they almost appear like a prime lens if you look into image quality. And I mentioned this several times on my channel. And this is a really nice image. You can print this in large dimension. You see people on the bridge here. You see people at the waterfront. And this is natural, because people chilling here out. And it's not natural to hex them away by artificial intelligence if you get the artifacts from a multi-shot pixel shift shooting. Now, since I had my WhatsApp blueprint with this image the client sent to me, here is something missing, right? This is still a comparably short exposure, and the water is not turned in this silky smooth surface. So the reflections are only here a little bit along the waterfront, but they are not coming into the scene towards you. And that's what the client wanted. So let's look at other images which he might like more. And first of all, here is one. Let's look into this. Still not silky enough, is 1/5 of a second. By the way, it's also a nice exposure. The evening atmosphere on this bridge towards the skyline of the city was just beautiful. I like that a lot. But let's continue to search what we have here. Here is an image with 2.5 seconds. And I also played a little bit here. This is an HDR image, so I did an exposure bracketing. There was also a ship going from the bridge towards the skyline of the city, which gives nice light trails here. I think this looks good. And I still have to find out if the client likes that. You know, some people like more these type of natural images. This is really the coloring of the sky and the city, how you could see it with your naked eyes. This is, of course, strongly post-processed. For my taste, I would not put it on the wall. It appears to me too much artificial, almost like a painting. But some people like that, and I will find out. You know, at the very end, the client dictates what she or he wants. It's not my business to decide what she or he prefers on their wall. And at least I want to offer it. It's also a very sharp image. It's 100 megapixel. Look at that. Very nice, sharp contours, edges, contrast, micro contrast. You also see movement fuzziness here with people moving, but that is not disturbing me and distracting me in the way the artifacts do from this pixel shift multishot, which I showed before. So it's a nice image, light trails. It's impressive if you look at it. It catches your eye. You get sticky to the image for a while, but do I want to put it on the wall in my living room? Probably not. It's a little bit too unrealistic for me in terms of coloring, too sharp, too accentuated. Let's continue to look into that. I think a nice one is this here. And here you see now, this is a 30-second exposure. And you see now, here we see these light reflections from the skyline coming really from the skyline towards me as the observer. And that is, I think, what I like and what the client likes. I think here I should probably adapt the white balance Let's get this a bit more natural. Let's here see that I think we keep it at 7500 on the temperature, but we give it a 20 on the tint, maybe even a 30. Let's have a look here how this looks like. And then it becomes a much warmer atmosphere. I think now the image looks better. I'm also thinking that this might be a little bit overexposed, so we could probably go with the exposure slider a little bit down, and then it becomes a more natural evening atmosphere here. So this one I like. I think this is one I can offer to the client. It has the reflections. As I mentioned before, when I showed that sample image, which he was WhatsApping to me, I'm not able to replicate the coloring in the water in the way this image was taken back then in 2013. And we saw in that image that the skyline appeared back then in 2013 more colorful than it is here. But at least we have the silky water, we have the reflections, we have the skyline, we have kind of the same framing, because here is this building from IBIS, here is the church, and here we have the skyline from, I think this is Commerzbank, and here Deka Bank, which is typical for Frankfurt. We have nice lights here along the waterfront and on the bridge. I think that looks good. I like that. So this is certainly an image which I will include in the portfolio for my offering for the client. And let's further look what we have here. You can also play again with HDR. So here's, I think, a very impressive shot. Looks really good. It's not so over accentuated as the HDR image I showed before, which almost looked like a painting to me and is not matching my taste. But it is an HDR image. I used exposure bracketing here for a 20-second exposure, which is a long time. I was happy nothing bad happened, and Lightroom assembled this nicely into one frame. You see here light trails, very likely from bikes. And you see a lot of movement fuzziness, but not these artificial colored pixels you have from the Pixel Shift Multishot. So that image looks actually very nice to me. It's one of my favorites from that night shooting. Very warm atmosphere. The sky is very nice here. It's, I think, nicely processed. You have absolutely no noise. It has a very high resolution with 100 megapixel. And you can stand in front of that image and discover certain details which you have not seen very likely if you have a distance of 5 meters and you just let the scene sinking in. So that is nice. I like that image, and it has these impressive reflections in the silky water, 20-second exposure, as I said, and you also have some different colors in the water here. So this is definitely also an image I include in the offering portfolio for the client. You can, of course, overdo it with HDR. I show you a couple of images here. This is, I think, overly done. This one here is good again. I like it. It's a nice one. But as I said, I mean, the client dictates, right? If he wants that very almost neon light, unrealistic glow, you can do it in that way. And by the way, I want to show you how you get this. So you go into the develop section here, and there is this HDR button. If I push that, you will see how all the light gets accentuated and emphasized. Watch this. Look at that. Actually, this one looks nice because it only does the HDR processing on the lights here. Look at that. I switch it off again. And now we let it glow, almost as if there would LED light behind the image and making it glow. It looks nice. This one here, I think, would probably find a place on my wall. I like it. Looks good. But I will probably put it in the offering portfolio in a natural way and not with this HDR touch and the glow in the water and on the skyline. Last but not least, let me look into this one here. This is another one with, I think, 16:9 aspect ratio. Is a wider field of view here. I wanted to include the church here on the left-hand side. Look how nice this image is. This is a really good image. Like it. And then you have here the skyline. You still have the other church on the right-hand side. You have the UBS bank building, and you have the bridge with all the lights. Look at that. 20-second exposure, all at f8.0, which is my landscape mode on the GFX100 Mark II, and base ISO of 80. That's why the images are so clear. From moving people here, we have some fuzziness, but no artifacts because this is not a multi-shot. That looks nice to me. I really like it. Look at the details here. It's also a nice perspective because you get here the other part of the bridge in full with these trees here and a second church included. I think that's also a nice one. Warm evening atmosphere. This will also go to the client for his selection. I think on the images, that's it. I wanted to show you, coming back on what I said in the Pixel Shift Multishot mode about switching in-body image stabilization on or off. It seems that I deleted that image I wanted to show you. It's no longer in here. I didn't find it when I prepared for the voiceover, which you just hear. And I can only confirm to you, and you can believe me or not believe me, in my experience, and it's not the first shooting, if I start to shoot 1, 2, 3, 5 seconds and I have in-body image stabilization activated, the image is never sharp. It becomes soft. It's not what I'm used to when I shoot with the Fuji GFX100 II. And that's why I made it a habit now to switch it off. So in-body image stabilization is off when I'm shooting on a tripod with a longer exposure. That's not the case for all my other cameras. Never had a problem with my Hasselblad X2D or my Sony, Nikon, Leica cameras. I can keep IBIS on all the time, even on the tripod for longer exposures. For the Fuji GFX, the camera just doesn't like it, at least in my experience. As I said, drop me a comment if you made the same experience. And I think this concludes the section on sample images. All right, that's it. That's all I wanted to say and show. I hope you liked the presentation and the images. I think this is a very versatile, fungible camera lens combination. We didn't talk in particular about the lens, but I wanted to have a zoom lens because I was not sure what will be the field of view if I found the right bridge. And that's why I mounted this particular lens here. And 35 to 70 millimeter on a 44 millimeter times 33 millimeter sensor was just doing the trick for me, as you saw in the sample images. This camera lens combination is really, really good for professionals. It's also not cheap, it's expensive, but it gets the job done. And in this particular case, I know my client will be happy with the images. If you liked that video, don't forget to drop me a thumbs up. Stay tuned on my channel. There's always more to come. Thanks for watching. Stay safe and healthy. And of course, peace out.